Welcome to Knock Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical 2-volume book set. I always want to do that before we show. So today we're talking about how would the Jewish people have responded to such an outrageous claim. So we're going to find that out right now with Rabbi Tovia Singer. Rabbi, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's good. I'm glad we're on. We worked out everything, and this is a very serious time we're in. Something we've been talking about. It's been in the headlines of the news worldwide.
God TV, yeah.
Very serious, man.
So how is that going now? I mean, I know there's been a lot of proactive stuff that I say we, I mean, meaning the non-evangelical world, the people who are Torah and Tanakh only. So how is the impact? How is that happening, or how is it impacting their goals right now? Is it being interfered? Is it being disrupted somehow because of the activity that we're all involved in now?
Well, clearly, what just for those who are first time hearing about this. So, God TV, it's a huge international fundamentalist Christian broadcasting station. They basically in almost every country in the world. They got a 7-year lease on the largest cable TV network here in Israel, which is called Hot TV, 700,000 homes, basically half the cable market here in Israel. And its purpose is to convert the Jewish people to Christianity and to be able to bypass every boundary to get into your house.
Mm-hmm, right.
Because it's right there on Hot TV, and they want to bring the gospel in Hebrew. And be careful, because with evangelical Christians, I mean, they are using specialized language and dog whistles in order to not offend the people they want to convert, so people don't understand what's happening. So they want to use terms like Jesus Christ rather to when they speak among themselves, but when they're speaking to Jews, it's Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel. They don't want to tell Jews to convert. They want them to become Messianic Jews. So it's a consumer fraud issue because they're playing games with words, and they want to convert kids, which is illegal here in Israel. It's mind-blowing because their goal is to just destroy the Jewish faith, convert every Jew to Christianity.
So the law there is that the only law there is that you can't evangelize to children, to minors.
There are two laws that mitigate. There are two laws that very strikingly are at play here. One is directly germane to what's happening, and that is that in Israel, it is against the law to convert anyone 18 years or younger, or to be involved in trying to convert anybody. And you remember, it was a few weeks ago, we had a young fellow call in on the show.
Right.
Turned out his parents are Jewish, raised him as a Christian. His father returned to Judaism. The first thing I asked him I kept him on, and the first thing I asked him is, how old are you? Right? He said 19. Mm-hmm. And so that was fine. I've had loads of times over the years, nearly 40 people called me, and I could tell that I had a suspicion that and I asked them, how old are you? And if they said 17, 16, whatever, I said, I need your parents to do it. And very often the parents said no. And I said, fine, just call me after you're, when you're not a minor anymore.
Right.
So, but these guys don't care. They want to reach the 9-year-olds. They want to convert everyone, and they want to do it in a way. It's called indigenous missions. They've got courses on this on Bible Moody Institute, on Moody Bible Institute. And now here's the game. The deal is that they should have never been given a license to be able to just come on and speak to any kids and try to convert them here in Israel.
Right.
And the deal is that on Tuesday, so that means the 19th of May, there's going to be a decision by officials in the Israeli government if the license will be withdrawn. And we'll see.
That's awesome news. It's good they're even that they're fighting it.
I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of work going on. What's going to happen? I don't know.
I've heard they have retracted. I've heard God TV has retracted several of their videos from before, I guess, advertising to their own people,
yeah.
right?
As soon as I put up the videos of what they were doing, and it was covered all over the media worldwide, they put on the video. Like, what are you pulling on the video? I mean, if you have nothing to be ashamed of,
exactly.
Why are you pulling down videos? And then another video goes up, and the next one, and then the next video goes up, and Ward Simpson, who's the president and CEO of God TV, goes, I'm in a little bit of trouble, and this, and then another missionary here, and I'm not going to name it. Ward Simpson, he's all over. But the another big missionary in Israel. His name is not important. He comes out and says, well, it was unfortunate. He didn't use the right words. He didn't. And the truth is that Ward Simpson got in a lot of trouble because everyone's going, we've been working for 25 years here in Israel to not use those words. It's the same goal, and you shot it off your mouth. And so you could see that he in these subsequent videos, Ward Simpson looks like he's gotten beaten up, and he's being much more restrained than he had, and less strident than he had previously. Well, I don't know what's going to happen, until it's a very, very dangerous thing, because these evangelicals are planning to destroy the Jewish faith, not the Jewish state. They want to destroy Judaism. But what they're doing is they're playing a game, and they're calling Christianity Messianic Judaism. It's a whole three-card Monte deal. Right. It's a whole thing of dealing from the bottom of the deck. And if you don't know what you're doing, you won't understand them, because you don't know their new dictionary and their training manuals. You won't know how to respond. You won't understand what's happening. It's just like, it's like you just don't. It's a shell game, and if you don't know, it's like going, watching a magic show in Las Vegas. And I don't know how they cut the lady in half. That's what's going on. So the whole thing is smoke and mirrors. So they mean the same thing,
right?
Jesus Christ, Yeshua Messiah, Messianic Jew means convert to Christianity, but they don't want to do that. Why? Because Jews generally, whether they're religious or not religious, are generally very proud of their Jewish identity and don't want to become Christians. And most Jews, I imagine many Jews don't know why completely, but they don't want to terminate their being Jewish. And they correctly understand that becoming a Christian means you're not Jewish. We're using conventional words. Now, I could play the missionary so easily. In the New Testament, the word Christian appears only 3 times. And in each and every instance, it's used by non-Christians. So Christian doesn't mean Christian, and it really means a washing machine, and a Jew really means a microwave, and it means an apple on top. This is a whole game. I know it. I would make an amazing missionary. I mean, if I work for Jews, if I work for them, I would know exactly how to do it. I know the whole game. I know the whole scam. I've been doing this for nearly 40 years.
Rabbi, you forget that, and when you were in Houston for the debate with Craig Evans, you played that role, and I was amazed. I was there watching it, and what's funny is, and guys, if you haven't seen this, I don't know if I have a copy of it yet still, but if I can, I may even share that. That was just brilliant. So picture the set. So we're at this synagogue, and the rabbi there introduces this not missionary, Jews for Jesus, had something he wanted to share. So out comes this guy wearing this Jews for Jesus T-shirt, and guess who that guy was? Yours truly, Rabbi Tovia Singer. The funny part was, I mean, no one there actually knew who Rabbi Singer was except for me and my friend Lon, who was sitting way in the back. And so he's going to town, and you can hear some grumbling going on in the audience and stuff. But Rabbi is doing a great job, and it was so amazing in that whole perspective. And then he finishes up. And then so he goes back in the back, and so the rabbi comes back up and says, okay, so that was the one side. So now I want to introduce you to this other rabbi who's going to tell you why Jews don't believe in Jesus. And it was hilarious. I wished I could have been at the pulpit looking at the crowd when you walked out the second time. It was amazing. Guys, these people are just, they're deceptive, they're in every bad way I could even imagine. The funniest thing that I heard recently was, I think they said something in the regards of, we don't want you to convert to Christianity. We just want you to become a fulfilled Jew and accept Yeshua the Messiah.
If I imagine for a moment that I wanted to convert Catholics to Judaism. So I'd stand in a mall in Houston in the Galleria, and I'd wear a priest outfit with a Roman collar, and I'd approach people and I'd say, do you want to become a true completed Catholic? Would you study the Talmud with me? I mean, I think most people go, that's a little dishonest.
Right.
This whole thing is a shell game. It's very, very dangerous. Moreover, they're coming to Israel. That means that you're coming into my home. You want to convert my kids, my grandchildren. You want to destroy their faith. Mm-hmm. Now, and not only that, there's real reason why Judaism does not accept the Christian Messiah, because theologically, it's the most offensive idea to the prophets of Israel, not to me, but to my rabbi. You know who my rabbi is? My rabbi, let me tell you who my rabbis are. And it might impress you. My rabbi is Rabbi Moses,
nice.
Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Isaiah, Rabbi Ezekiel, Rabbi Jeremiah. Those are the rabbis of Israel, the prophets of Israel. Those are our chief rabbis.
Right.
And everything that you are teaching is opposed by the chief rabbis of the Jewish people, the prophets of Israel, the greatest men and women that ever lived in human history, and most importantly, the God of Israel. So we're really on a collision course here. Mm-hmm. So they don't want me going out and, coming, will they allow me? Can I go on their TV networks and tell them about Judaism and why there's one God and no other and there's not for you? They wouldn't like that. They wouldn't, believe me, they wouldn't appreciate that. I have been, okay, let me just end with this piece here.
Okay.
I have been at the same hotels as a guest at a Marriott or Sheraton, wherever it is, where there's a Messianic conference going on. And I'm not going into their conference. I don't go into their stuff. I'm a guest at the same hotel where there's some Messianic thing going on. Do you know how many times they try to get me thrown out? Do you know how many times they try to get me thrown out? I mean, maybe years and years ago. Oh, what do you do? Free speech. What are you doing? And Marriott and Sheraton's not going to throw out. I wasn't doing anything. But they don't, when it's on the other foot, they're not, believe me, they're not. So that's
right.
So that's all. Enough of this said. I can't tell you. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I don't want to. There's nothing more to say about this now.
Okay.
It's a very dangerous situation, and these guys want to destroy the Jewish faith. By the way, if there's an evangelical Christian out there who loves Israel and really does not support what God TV is doing and condemns it, this is the time for you to step up. You want to claim you're not a mission. I want to just say this. It's really, really important. If there is out there an evangelical Christian who people just are not sure about you, or they're pretty sure you are a missionary and you want to convert Jews, but you're kind of keeping a distance because you don't want to. Well, there's the deal. This is what you need. This would really go a long way. Come out now and condemn God TV's effort to convert Jews to Christianity here in Israel. Do that now, and that would really go a long way to convince Israelis that you have no ulterior motives. You don't have to do it because your job in life is not to make the people of Israel happy and comfortable with you. But you've been working a really long time trying to convince all of us that you're not trying to convert Jews to Christianity, and you're just working the land. Okay? You've been doing that. So all you have to do now is, instead of start, spinning wheels and doing circus acts, all you have to do now, if you're here in Israel and you're doing all kinds of stuff on the land, and you've been kind of trying to distance yourself from missionary activity, here's what you can do. If you came out right now and said that Jewish evangelism like this should not be on on cable TV that everyone can act, and you condemn it, and you urge the Israeli government to withdraw the license, believe me, you would convince all of us that you have no ulterior motive. That's all I'm going to say to you.
Right.
So this is the time. This is showtime. This would go a real long way to convince everyone that you don't have an ulterior motive, and people think you do or know you do. But if you're going, no, I don't, then this is the time. And there have been a few Christians that have stepped forward. There have been a few. Not many, but there have been. And believe me, they're driving everyone else crazy. That's why I always put that modification in. I say, look, there are some Christians that are embarrassed by this, which is true, but they don't represent, they are an anomaly.
Right.
So I want to talk to you right now. You're a Christian here in Israel, okay? And you're doing all kinds of stuff on the land. You're pruning, you're planting, all kinds of stuff, but you claim you're not a missionary. Here's what you can do. We're watching you. This is the time for you to step forward to say that you condemn what God TV is doing and that Israel should not condemn, because you know exactly what's going on. Okay? Because Ward Simpson was unfiltered. That was the difference. Ward Simpson, I don't know him personally, but he's kind of an unfiltered guy, which means he's kind of in a way saying the truth. He's saying we want the Jews to come to know Jesus Christ, and if the Jews convert, then Jesus will make a second coming. He laid it out there, so this is your chance now. If you're a Christian here in Israel, and you just come out and say it, and believe me, that's going to go a long way. And I don't know that you will, but if you do, I think people will be impressed. Enough said.
Very good, Rabbi. Okay, so we can go ahead and move right on into our show. So, caller, welcome to the show. You're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Yes, my name is Victor. I'm calling from New York. My question is, is in regards to the virgin birth in the context of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. The question is, how would have been the Jews' reaction for knowing the claim of a woman having a virgin birth fathered by God?
Oh, he just disconnected. All right, Rabbi, go ahead and you got the question fully on that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, go ahead with it. Thanks. It's all yours.
All right. So the question is, how would if we could turn back the clock 2,000 years, how would Jews have reacted to the claim that the Messiah was born of a virgin, or Jesus was born of a virgin, or anyone was born of a virgin? How would they have reacted? So there's really multiple layers to this. Just a caveat, as it turns out, I think it's about 6 years ago, there was a nun. I think, when I say there is a nun, I think you know where this is going right now. Believe it or not, it happened. There was a Scandinavian nun in Italy who had a baby boy. I'm not kidding. Look it up for yourself. And she said that she hadn't been with him, that she's a virgin and nothing happened. Well, how did they handle it? I mean, God couldn't have made her praying. Well, it goes without saying that her career as a nun was adversely affected. Okay. All right. I mean, people know do this. All right. How would the Jews have responded to the claim that someone was born of a virgin 2,000 years ago? So it's not that they would have handled it the way anybody would handle such a claim today. It would even be not just more suspicious, but repulsed by it. And the reason for that is that the claim that some great person was born to a woman who didn't sleep with a man was ubiquitous throughout the Greco-Roman world. Throughout the pagan world, the godmen, that means these people, there were many tiers of gods in the henotheistic system, which means there's a big god, but there's minor gods. At that lowest level of gods, the one where you have someone who's both man and god, invariably they're born to virgins. Or in the case of Hercules, his mother just slept with Zeus, and Zeus was a very busy person apparently. So because all the gods of the ancient world, the god men, whether they're Alexander the Great, the founder of of the West, of Western civilization, he was believed to be born of a virgin. Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome, born to a virgin. Pythagoras, the great thinker, mathematician, was genius. No one that great could just have been human. They had to be gods. All the Octavius, Caesar Augustus, born to a virgin. So therefore, that sort of claim, it's not just set off alarms. It's not like this doesn't smell kosher. It's that it would fall into the pattern of a very pagan idea. Now, as it turns out, the earliest Christians didn't believe that Jesus was born a virgin, or they just didn't think that that was important enough to mention. The earliest surviving Christian literature are the letters of Paul, all written during the 50s. All those that are indisputed, they're written during the 50s. Somehow Paul didn't think that Jesus' miraculous conception was important enough to mention. In Galatians 4:4, he just refers to Jesus as the son of a woman. Why not the son of a virgin? That would have been Mark, the earliest surviving gospel. Mark just didn't think that Jesus was conceived in between a union of God and Mary, and he goes, no, I don't think so. We'll just go with the paralytic guy. That's a more interesting story. So, and it kind of goes without saying that you figured out by now that Mark does not include an infancy narrative, and we're introduced to Jesus in the book of Mark as an adult at his baptism. That's how the book of Mark begins. People don't get that. People go, really? And the reason they don't get it is not that they haven't read the New Testament. The reason is there's almost not a person on this planet that read the book of Mark but has not yet read the book of Matthew. I'm going to say that again. There's probably not a person on this planet that has read Mark but hasn't read Matthew yet. Because the chronology of the way the New Testament Gospels are laid out in the Christian Bible, you're always reading Matthew first. And then, so when you get to the 678 passages in the book of Mark, you read Matthew already, and it kind of sounds very similar. That's why it's called synoptic Gospels. And people just sort of fill it in, even though it isn't there. So the early Christians didn't know anything about Jesus born of a virgin, but as Christianity, which begins as a sect, a breakaway of Judaism, further spins away from any Jewish, so then the church then inculcates the virgin birth into their religion. That's why it only makes its way into the books of Matthew and Luke, written roughly the same time, written in the 80s of the first century. So by then already it was already, that was the thinking of Christians, and that's why he made it in. Matthew and Luke use a completely different plot device to explain how that could possibly happen. John, conversely, has such a high Christology, where Jesus is a logos, so we don't even virgin birth. He's from the eternal past. He's the logos. Whatever that means, he's big and bigger than Matthew and Luke, and therefore we don't need to talk about virgin birth because that's not when he became the Son of God. In Luke's view, that's when he became the Son of God, and you see that in the Annunciation. So there's no Mary, the mother of Jesus, that one of many Marys. She's never mentioned by name in the book of John. She's mentioned, but never by name, because John's trying to get you away from that. So therefore, a claim of virgin birth to the Jewish ear in 2,000 years ago would not have passed the sniff test. It would have triggered every alarm possible, because that would match exactly what we find in the Greco-Roman world. That's just, they're all born of virgins. Now, I want to, two more points. It's so important. This is so important. So, for one, I just want to get this out of the way. It would have been, in the scheme of all of God's miracles, large and small, a woman, a virgin, conceiving and having a baby would be a minor miracle in the grand scheme of God's creation and the miracles that you find in the Jewish scripture. The reason why we don't believe in it has nothing to do that God couldn't do it. And people think that, oh, if God can have an old lady Sarah have a baby, couldn't he have a virgin? Well, of course he could. And people get all excited about that. In fact, scientifically, it would be easier, it would be more likely that a virgin could conceive through parthenogenesis than an old woman, a 90-year-old woman who has no eggs left. There's nothing to conceive. So biologically, the virgin birth is nowhere near as big a miracle as a woman who has no eggs left. Caveat here, a girl is born with every egg she's going to ever have. She doesn't have the factory that men do. Okay? All right. So I just want to get that out of the way because I know someone's going to. So another point here. The virgin birth reeks of idolatry, paganism, Greek dualistic thought, which had permeated the pagan world long before Christianity. Reeks of idolatry, reeks of everything that is unholy. Here's the reason. What do you need a virgin birth for? You know, as it turns out, a virgin birth can't be a sign because you can't see it. You know, imagine if you're in a delivery room and a virgin is giving birth. What precisely would you see? I mean, they're reporting eyewitness to a virgin birth. What did you see? Look, I have kids. I was in the delivery room. Many of you were. Okay, what would you see that would tell you a virgin gave birth? There's nothing to see. Like, what are you seeing? So the key of the virgin birth is the reason why this is so pervasive in the pagan world is the following. In dualistic thinking, there is an idea that's pervasive, and that is the following, that this material world and the spiritual world are really not compatible at all. That really the highest level is to be without this physical wretched body. We have to escape this world. Materialism is on a lower level. The idea that intimacy between a man and a woman would produce a god that's inconceivable to them. Paul says it in Romans chapter 7. He says it explicitly that, the ideal is to be celibate like him. And he urges the unmarried to not get married. He says a lot of things. But where did he get that from? It's not Jewish. But in the pagan world, the idea of complete monasticism, the separation from the physical world, and very important, that your mommy didn't sleep with anyone, that's the ideal. In Judaism, that is insane. The intimate union between a husband and wife is you're in partnership with God in the creation process. So therefore, it is repulsive at its core. And that's why when I tell you that you could read Paul's writings and immediately see the Greek mind that it emerged from, I'm not kidding. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul's talking about the spiritual body of the resurrected Jesus is very different than the physical body. That's the way the Greek world thought. That's not the way the Jewish world thought at all. Now, the church would come to correct that in later literature, and I'm referring to the Gospels, and particularly not Mark, because Mark ends at chapter 16 in verse 8. The 9 through 20 is a later, those last 12 passages is a later edition, but in Matthew, Luke, and John. So there you have very physical, because it swings back. So therefore, the virgin birth, it's not just who would believe that or no one would believe that. The underlying theology that would trigger the claim of virgin birth is one that is revolting to Judaism. I always tell people, just look at Exodus chapter 3, right at the beginning. Moses' parents. A man from Levi took a woman from Levi. That was it. No virgin birth. Nothing. So therefore, it was a revolting idea, because just, oh, here we go again. So it's here we go again. And finally, when the book of Matthew becomes known to the Jewish world, there's probably no person in human history that's more responsible for the Jewish rejection of Jesus than the author of the book of Matthew. If Matthew had never been written, if the book of Matthew had never been written, unfortunately, it's bad to say this, but many more Jews would have converted. Matthew just made it just impossible to believe, because Matthew lied. He mischaracterized what the prophet said. He's the one that has all these fulfillment citations. And the one I'm thinking about is Matthew 1:23, where Matthew goes much further than Luke, and it says, don't just think that Mary's conceiving with child is an arbitrary. Oh no, that's a fulfillment. What was said in the book of Isaiah was said in the prophet as a prophet, and then he completely misquotes Isaiah 7:14, claiming it says, "Behold, the Lord of His own will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means God is with us." I mean, you have no idea. This should be like a Rorschach test. This should be like, just figure out how many elements of Isaiah 7:14 have been ripped to pieces in order to produce Matthew 1:23. That should be like an entrance exam to get into an Ivy League school. Can you figure out how many times, in how many different ways, the original text was molested? And that's right, I use that word, molested, by the church. So therefore, answering your question, Jews would actually have been more mortified by that claim 2,000 years ago than today. Because today, that's not the typical claim, because we're not living in that kind of world where religions are beginning with people who said they were born virgins. Joseph Smith didn't make that claim in the 19th century. Then they were really sensitive to this. Today, that's not the way things are claimed. It doesn't mean it never happens today, but it's not all over the place. Then it was, so right away, that's not just a red flag. That's not just a smoking gun. That's the whole murder scene in 4K. It's everything. So they immediately knew that this thing was not of God. And rather than Rome converting to Christianity converted to Rome. Thank you for that question.
All right, very good. We'll move on to the next caller. Caller, welcome to the show. You're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
I'd like to begin by just dedicating this question to my uncle who just passed from COVID, Avram Yitzchak ben Yaakov Zev. If I could just put that out there.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
sorry about this.
Very sad, but we should all have redemption from this invisible monster. So, as it turns out, I've been learning Tanakh a lot in the past 4 or 5 years due to the missionaries. I'm not giving them credit, but it's just spurred me to discover things that, why should they know more than I know? So I'm looking at the book of Jonah, and I'm looking at the part in the first chapter where they throw him into the water, and they saw that the waters stopped, churning, and they realized that there was a God, and then they all basically converted to Judaism, or to monotheism, if you will. Then we see in Jonah chapter 3:10 that if that the whole city of Nineveh did tshuva, that repented. Is it possible, because the book seems to be written mostly for non-Jews, from my take, is it possible that God wrote this book as a rebuttal to Christianity, as a prophetic rebuttal? Was there a pervasive mentality that you can't do tshuva on your own, you can't repent on your own at that time, that had to be spoken about. And I just wanted to know what the rabbi has to say about that. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen. Thank you, brother.
That's a really good question.
Okay, repack that for me, please. I need to be able to put a...
Yeah, I sure am.
Okay,
I sure am.
thank you.
Okay. It's like, those are the kinds of questions I sometimes have to wait months for. Repackage the question? All right. So in the book of Jonah, we have famously a reluctant prophet. We find out later why he was reluctant, but he is sent to Nineveh. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria, not Syria, but Assyria. And the capital there was the worst, to repent. And Jonah had a number of concerns. He was worried that the people of Nineveh would repent, and how would that characterize the Jews? And there were many issues there. His sense of justice. The point is, he fled the scene. Now, why is huge? And I actually have shows that I've done on this, but this is not that show, so we're just going to ignore that. So the question is in Jonah chapter 3, verse 10, we are told, we have the report that the people of Nineveh, upon hearing the admonishment of the prophet Jonah, repent. They do tshuva. And as a result, what was decreed upon them, that the city would be destroyed or overturned, if you go back to the original text, was overturned a different way. It wasn't destroyed. Okay? So these passages are a fatal blow to the claims of Christianity, particularly the letters of Paul. And I'm really thinking about Romans chapter 3 right now. Why? Because in Christian theology, this would have been a completely impossible task. In Christian theology, no person's efforts can achieve salvation. If what I'm saying to you sounds surprising or foreign or alien, that there's nothing you can do to save yourself, then, my friends, you have the good fortune of never having been in a church. Okay? This is every Sunday. Not that I go to church every Sunday, just take my word for it. In Christian theology, there is no effort that man can make to save himself. There are no works and so on. And it's a whole thing. In Romans chapter 3, Paul is just lacing together verses from here. Don't ask what's going on. You can only imagine. Okay? But that's the point. And that idea is ensconced in the core tenets of the Christian church. And for good reason, because if you could repent and do tshuva, and God will actually forgive you, then what do you need Jesus for? And so then Christianity would then be like trying to sell snowballs to the Eskimos. We don't need this. We can do tshuva. The reason why Christianity is the motherlode of idolatry is that it completely ignores the admonishment found in Tanakh. The book of Jonah is there to say that you can do it. And if you turn back, God will forgive you. Now, here's what many people don't notice. It's not that I'm a genius, just got to pay attention. Nineveh was not the only place on earth that people repented in. So why pick on Nineveh? Why? Because Nineveh was the worst place around. Because Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. It's like the worst. So what is the takeaway? The takeaway is, if Nineveh can repent and God will forgive them, well, no matter what you did in your life, it's not as bad as Nineveh, then God will surely forgive you. What is the message? That the person who's most critical of you is the person you see when you look in the mirror. And the reason why people don't repent is because they believe that they're incapable of repenting. It's not that they can't go through the motions. People believe, thoroughly convinced, that I have done things in my life that are so horrible. If my husband knew, he would never talk to me again. Our marriage would be over if he knew every stupid thing I did. My wife would throw me out of the house if she knew. But I know what I've done, and God knows what I've done, and therefore he's never going to forgive me. So what does Tanakh do? Listen, this is so delicious. Mili Malyus, it's really the words that will lift you up. beyond the heavens. So what Tanakh does is it sends the message by saying, okay, we're going to pick out the worst people in history who repented, and we're going to highlight them. Menashe. Was there a worse Davidic king in history than Menashe? No. But in the book of Chronicles, we are told that Menashe repented and God forgave him. And where was he? He was in Bavel. He's in Babylon. The message is, if you think you're bad, you didn't do nothing like Menashe, and I forgave him, I'll forgive you. This is huge. So Christianity it's not like a new religion that came out of, and it surely didn't come out of Judaism. Christianity was the natural outgrowth of this cancer of ideas that are well ensconced in the pagan world. And that is that God is huge. Zeus is big. In fact, in the ancient world, people couldn't even go to Zeus. They didn't pray to Zeus. In the ancient world, in the Greek world, people did not go, oh, Zeus, whatever, my wife can have a baby. Zeus didn't have time for you. Zeus was running the planets. This is how the ancient world thought. Zeus was running the planets and getting ladies pregnant. He had no time for the problem you have that your cow isn't giving milk. They were much lower tier gods that you did pray to and bring offerings to, so you would have wine, so you'd be successful in war, that you'd be successful in your baby. You didn't go for the big god. The big god has no time for you. Same thing with Jupiter. People didn't pray. There were state ceremonies in the ancient world. There were, where there would be great ceremonies to Zeus, for sure. And the emperor presided, or to all these offerings to Jupiter and Apollo, and those were huge ceremonies. That, yes. But you should go, your personal, it was the idea that you can go to God, he's huge, and that you could smell Christianity. Christianity is the symptom of this. And that's why what is preached and pounded from the pulpit is that you can't do it. I mean, Calvinists, but Calvinism isn't, Calvin didn't pull this out of the air. Calvin was just running off all the stench of the church fathers. I mean, most notably Augustine. And Augustine didn't make this up. Yeah, Augustine was influenced by the religion he belonged to before he converted to Christianity. But Augustine was taking this from Paul. And Paul was taking this from Athens. Do you get what's happening here? Oh, so therefore, this problem that people feel that I can't approach God, the creator of the heavens and earth, and he will never forgive me because I would never forgive me if I were God. That's what we do. We play God. We go, look, if I were God, I would never forgive me what I did when I was 17. When I was 23, I did something so bad. If I were God, I wouldn't forgive me. And then we create God in our image and presume that God hasn't, in fact, forgiven me. This is why Christianity is so successful, because it plays off this. And that's what Christianity is. It's about creating God in our image. I want to say that again. Christianity is about creating God in our image. Now, I know when you hear that, you're like, oh, you mean you have God, Jesus, the second person triune Godhead. Yes, but that's not the most important thing. Creating God in our image means that we impose onto God our character and our abilities. His ability for love and mercy is something that we could never achieve. You can never be as merciful as God. Never. We seek to emulate God's merciful quality. Every aspect of God we are called upon to imitate. Kedoshim tiyu ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokecha. Be holy, because the Lord thy God is holy. For sure, every quality of Hashem, we say, Mahu rachum afatar rachum. Just as He is merciful, you should be merciful. Of course, but in no way could we have a hope to be as merciful as Hashem. Can't, not possible. So therefore, the book of Jonah is there to address a problem that was ensconced in paganism, that was very popular, not for bad reason, not insanity. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You know, the Hasidic person who goes to his rabbi says, my son is nuts. Why is your son nuts? He says, well, he eats pigs and dances with women. So the rabbi said, your son isn't nuts. If you told me your son eats women and dances with pigs, then I think you're crazy. You know, he's crazy. But so the point is that Christianity exploits all of our fears in order to convey a message that cannot heal you. And people wind up worshiping a God that cannot save you. So Jonah, but it's not Jonah, it's Isaiah 55, verse 6, 7, 8, 9. Read it now and be cleansed. That's all I can tell you. We read it. We Jews read Isaiah 55, verse 6, 7, 8. I'm not going to go into it now, but it's so gorgeous. Every fast day. Why? Because you can. God is waiting for you to turn back to him. And Christianity simply exploited, used all the pagan ideas, and just had a Jewish background historically, meaning using the creation account and so on, in order to produce a religion that would spread throughout the world. And it worked. Thank you for your question.
Okay, very good. Awesome. I will take the next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Yes, my name is Matthew. I'm from South Carolina.
Welcome.
I was wondering, okay, I hear all the time that from Christians that every Jew learned Greek, that they taught it, that they spoke it, that they completely understood it, and that basically the Greek is another interpretation. But if I myself go into a further study, I find out that basically the Greek seems to be a corrupt language, but not only that, but you also understand the culture as well. I'd like to hear the rabbi's take on that.
Okay, don't hang up just yet because your call is broken, but I think I understood. Just sit tight. Rabbi, did you catch the fullness of that?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay,
Good
very good.
question.
Okay, you can go ahead and hang up now and tune in for your answer then. I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Okay, Shabbat Tov.
Shabbat Tov.
Oh, well, you know what? What I'm going to do, one thing. Are you still there?
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
Stay. I'm going to repeat the question, and I want you to say yes if I got it right. Okay? Because I don't want. I think you're asking a good question. So what you're saying is that Christians claim that everyone in the Roman world, in the Levant, everybody spoke Greek, and in fact, that you're suggesting that's not the case, and of course the ramifications would be enormous, probably more than you realize. Do I get that question?
Yeah.
Okay, you're beautiful. Hang up, and we'll answer that question directly.
Thanks for calling in. Okay, awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rabbi, go ahead.
That's a really, really good question. So, as it turns out, the Greek language during the 2,000 years ago was the lingua franca, was kind of what English is, was the dominant language because of Alexander the Great. Of course, we're going back centuries earlier. But there's a very big difference. It wasn't English today. I mean, really, those of you who've traveled know that you really can travel to many, many countries and get away with English. Not everywhere, but you can. English is much more dominant today than it was during the Greco-Roman period. So in the Greco-Roman period, of course, people in the large cities who were educated, of course, spoke Greek. But people in, the word pagan actually comes from a word that means suburbs that aren't from the cities. So the people who were from more rural areas certainly didn't speak, and the Jews didn't. I was like no Jews spoke Greek. In fact, if you were going to be on the Sanhedrin, you would have had to know Greek, because you would have to have listened to any testimony in its original language. But the religious Jews didn't study Greek. They didn't want anything to do with Greek because Greek represented everything that was unholy. I mean, Hanukkah just happened 175 years earlier. You get it? That was Greek. That was Syrian Greek. So Greek represents in our literature all that is alien to Judaism. As it turned out, Jews didn't walk around speaking Greek at all. And this is not controversial. the language that Jewish people conversed in the land of Israel in the first century in Eretz Yisrael was Aramaic. That's how people spoke, a language that is a sister language of Hebrew. When I say sister, really, it's like a close sister. And that's what they spoke. Now, were there any cities in the northern part of Israel, in the Galilee, for example, where people spoke Greek? Only 2 cities people would have spoken Greek in the ancient world. Ephesus and Tiberias. That was it. Outside of that, it's not like no one did, but they didn't. You know, there are different scholars on this that have different ideas, but they're arguing whether 3% or 5% write Greek. That's a whole different ballgame. I hope you get the difference. I mean, think for yourself. You're watching the show. It is extremely likely that you speak English, and many of you, I presume, are native English speakers. But how many English speakers could write well? Could write a book? Could write a well? Not everybody. So to write, the New Testament was written in, some books are better written than others. You know, the book of Luke and Hebrews are written much better Greek than the book of Mark. But they're all, whoever wrote any of the books in the New Testament, these were highly literate Christians who lived with the exception of Paul, lived in the second half of the first century. So aside from 2 cities in the north, people didn't speak Greek. They spoke Aramaic. That was the conversation. This is really important because Jesus, anyone in a fishing village in the north would not be speaking Greek. So in the ancient world, yes, in the big cities, people were educated, citizens, they spoke Greek, but other people did not. They spoke whatever the local language was. And the local language here in Eretz Yisrael was Aramaic. Jews were concerned about using Hebrew, pure Hebrew, as the conversational language because it's a holy language. So if you can have a language that uses a lot of Hebrew, but it's not thoroughly Hebrew, they would opt for that in conversation and reserve Hebrew for praying, for studying, and so on. And it is, I'm not going to say it's astonishing because most Jews don't think about this. But those who do go, oh, God started speaking Greek. This is a problem for Christians. The fact that the Christian Bible is written in Greek is weird. It's not just weird in a fun way. It's weird in a really bad way. And in fact, there are many Christians, especially from the evangelical world, that want to find any possible proof that the Gospels were written in Hebrew, or maybe Matthew was written in Hebrew. And they'll go to Papias, the 2nd century church father. We don't even have anything that Papias wrote. Nothing survived. But we have later writings by church fathers who claim that Papias said that the logi of Matthew written. Logi means the saying. It's not a gospel, but whatever. That's all nonsense. Just forget all that. But they want that to be true. And there are a lot of people who want it to be true that there's a Hebrew Matthew. There is a Hebrew Matthew, but it doesn't date back to the 1st century. It dates back in the last millennium, so in the last 1,000 years. So therefore, that really, it's not weird, it's offensive to everything that was going on in Eretz Yisrael at the time. Greek was the culture that was an enemy of the Jewish faith, and this language that was used to convey it was something that was alien to the Jewish people in more ways than one. Thank you for your question.
All right, very good. All right. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Is that me?
Yes, you are live on the air.
Greetings, Mr. Hall, and my Rabbi Tovia Singer Shlita.
Svi, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. This has been occurring to me for a while. When you're dealing with something like with this God TV kind of a deal, I would imagine that wouldn't the Muslims be grievously offended by this too? Because their doctrine of Tawhid, I've also studied Islam, is an absolute monotheism, and wouldn't they be furious that other people that are absolute monotheists in every sense of the word would be targeted? Wouldn't they be afraid that the Arabs would be next? Why is it, at least maybe I'm wrong, but why is it there's not a major upheaval amongst Arab clerics, Muslim clerics throughout the world to this? Because there are attempts to convert Muslims to Christianity throughout the world as well. Why would they not be coming down, practically with a vengeance on this? I would think that they would.
That's a good question.
Yeah, thank you, Svi. Go ahead and hang up now, and you continue your answer. Okay, thanks.
So I'm gonna hang up, but I wish you well, Rebbe, and I always intend to be your chassid.
Thank you, brother. Shalom, shalom. We'll talk to you soon. All right, Rabbi, take it away.
It's so interesting. So, this is so strange that this happened, and I know the Muslims. There are quite a number of Muslims who watch the show, and a few of them are really dear friends, really, really close friends of mine. And I had 3 phone calls today from Muslims around the world about the God TV issue, because I have a number of videos up on YouTube where I unpack what is the scandal that's going on, that these missionaries who are intent on destroying Judaism and converting the Jewish people to Christianity, using the whole names and changing, playing word games. So they call me to just tell me that they're very proud of what I'm doing. I had so many emails from Muslims on this, because Muslims worship one God. And that's something they have a lot of respect for Judaism, and therefore it disturbs them. And in fact, Muslims, not in Saudi Arabia, but more Muslims living in Europe, for example, are under constant attack from Christians who are trying to convert them. Let's just be clear here: the conversion of what's really going on in the Muslim world in Europe, for example, is that there is enormous pressure coming from Christians and Muslims to convert to Christianity, and the other way around. That's where it really is. And the Muslim world is dealing with this challenge in a very serious way. So Muslims who believe in one God and one God only, right? It's called Tawheed. It means a complete unitary belief. Are appalled by what God TV wants to do here in Eretz Yisrael. And God TV, remember, is a station that one of its centers is in the UK. So they've got to deal with this there. It's interesting. Right before I went on air with you, I got a phone call from a dear Muslim friend who lives in the UK. And he said to me, he's very sweet, and he said to me, "Rabbi, thank you, I love you, respect you, I love what you're doing." But his take was, the Jews know better, and they know they're never going to get caught up in this thing, because many of these Muslims have a lot of respect for religious Jews, but I think many of them think that more Jews are knowledgeable about their faith than in fact are. There's enormous literacy here in Israel, as has not been since the days of Chizkiah, days of Hezekiah. But I think from the outside, they're not really sure. So I said to him that he wondered, perhaps I should just be silent about it, because it's not of God and it's all nonsense, the Trinity. We all know that. He's saying that. And so I said this to him. I said, we look at the prophets of Israel. These are the greatest men and women who've ever lived. And we see how they behaved in the face of spiritual threat and idolatry and so on. And then we seek to emulate them, because we believe, represent the highest standard of humanity. So when I do something, whatever it is I'm doing, I ask myself, what would Isaiah have done? Well, Isaiah tells us when he was done. It's all over the place, everywhere. I mean, you really have some of the most. Let me just say, if you want to fall in love, like go wild for God, just go. I mean, it's really everywhere, but there's really ecstatic literature. If you read Isaiah 44, 45, 46, you literally you'll get lost. It's really, really quite beautiful. It's just so elegant in the way Yeshaya wrote. So I have to say, well, my rabbi is Rabbi Isaiah, Rabbi Yeshayahu. That was his name. He's my rabbi. And I have to ask the question, did Isaiah take the idolatry that was pervasive during the Assyrian Empire and just go, well, they're not going to go. No, he spoke about it in the most amazing ways, and that's how we do that. And he called Abraham the friend of God in Isaiah 41, 8, and 9. And Abraham resisted the idolatry that was not just pervasive in the world, but in his own family. Abraham did not come from, his father was not the greatest man who ever lived. His father was not only an idol worshiper, he had an idol worshiping business. So we see that how Jeremiah addressed idolatry and how the God of Israel addressed idolatry in the Ten Commandments. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzisecha me'eretz Yisrael beis avodim. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt from the house of bondage. Lo yihi lecha elohim acherim al panai. Shall have no other gods upon my face. There you go. So, and he was this Muslim from the UK. He's watching it now, I'm sure. So he was like so happy to hear that, because people struggle. How do you deal with these things? So when the prophet Isaiah says the role of the Jew is Atem Edai Nom Hashem, you are my witnesses, declares the Lord. For Avdi Asher Bacharti, the servant that I have chosen. For what reason? L'man Tedu, so that you may know, V'saminuli, and believe in me, V'savinu, and comprehend and grasp. What? Ki anihu, I am him. That's capital H. Lefonai, before me, loy notzael. Before me, no God was created. Va'achlai lo yiyeh, and there will be no God after me. There is nothing else. And in case you're not sure, verse 11. Anochi, even I'm the Lord. Ve'ein mi bal adai, Moshe, and besides me, there is no Savior. I hope you heard that in Rome. I hope you're paying attention to that at the Southern Baptist Convention. I hope you're listening to that at the Assembly of God. Let that ring to Dallas Theological Seminary and Full Theological Seminary. Those are the words of our rabbis. Is Judaism rabbinic Judaism? You better believe it. And these are our chief rabbis. So therefore, if the prophets of Israel, our greatest men and women who ever lived, spoke out against any form of idolatry, any aberration of Judaism, we're not going to remain silent now. And the Muslims are very concerned about this and are very, very pleased that we're responding to this. Ata hareis ladas, you have been shown this that you may know. Ki Hashem hu Elokim, because the Lord is God. Ein oid milvado, there is no one else besides him, nothing. That's not the word of an anti-missionary. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 35. There is nothing else besides him, nothing. Thank you for your question.
Excellent answer. All right, Rabbi, do you have time for more? It's right about an hour, and I know we started a couple hours late.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Knock it out of here.
Okay, perfect. So, caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, Rabbi. My name's Jesse. I'm calling from Toronto. It's such a pleasure to be social distancing with you today. I have a question, and it's not on Isaiah 7, but that's where kind of this all started from. I was having a conversation with a gentleman who actually knew the Bible fairly well, and he tried to make the claim that they all do, that Alma means virgin, and I told him, no, it doesn't. And then he said, well, the rabbis knew this because they use the word Parthenos. And I showed him an example of Dinah being called a Parthenos right after she had been raped. So I took him to Proverbs to show him that Alma doesn't always mean virgin. And I showed him the verse of the four things. I believe it's Proverbs 30. I'm sorry, I don't have a Bible in
Proverbs
front of
30,
me.
18 through 20. Go ahead.
There you go. You got it. And then I showed it to him, and his interpretation was something I had never seen before. I showed him, I explained to him my interpretation that, these are all things that don't leave a sign, and he agreed. But he said that the sign was that of the man, not of the Alma. And I had never heard this interpretation, and he said that this was a different interpretation than. He said I had bad. What's the word? I wasn't interpreting it correctly, and I said, "Well, this is how Rashi interprets it." And I showed him like 20 different articles.
Don't do that. I'm going to keep you on, sweetheart. Stay with me, okay?
Okay.
Just stay with me. So all you have to do is read the next verse. I'm going to teach not just you, but I want everyone to get this. And this is not my own. The Talmud says this. If a heretic comes to you and tries to take your faith away from you, know that the answer is always nearby. You never forget that. The answer is there. Just go a little further, and you'll always just look at the. What's the next verse? What's verse 20? Verse 20 says, this is the way of the adulterous woman. What does she do? She eats. She then wipes her mouth and says, I have done nothing wrong. And it is specifically, bear in mind, that a married woman, meaning a non-virgin, who would have intercourse, there would be no sign of the intercourse because nothing biologically has been changed by the illicit affair. Conversely, a virgin would show a sign of difference. That's the whole point. The whole point is that just like a snake going over a rock leaves no trail, in contrast to sand, just like a ship passing through the sea, after its wake, the sea comes together and there's nothing left there. And the same thing of an eagle in the sky. After it leaves, you look at the sky, there's no way that's exactly how a married woman would display signs. There are no signs. All she has to do is take a shower and she just looks like she did before. So just look at the context. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us. That's great. I cover this extensively in Volume 1. I'm sure you know that of Let's Get Biblical. And I thought you could bring up other issues. But look, it really, if you're a native English speaker, it's really, really simple. So in English, in American English, you ever wonder why when you get a new computer and you got to load like Windows 10, whatever it is, so they ask you, do you want UK English or American English? So there are differences, and we think these differences are cute. So in like Americans really don't use the word maiden. It's not. I mean, it is in our dictionary, but who says that? Like, unless we're going to say maiden voyage or something like that, which means the first voyage, it implies virginity. Okay, but that's not a part of our vernacular. So Alma is a unique Hebrew word that conveys two things. It conveys youth and gender, female and young, not an old lady. And it's specifically young women that have babies rather than old women. So all this is nonsense. And Isaiah had no problem using the word basula. That word basula appears in the book of Isaiah 5 times. 5 times. That's like almost 1 out of every 10 chapters. 1 out of every 11 chapters, that word's there. He didn't have a problem using it. So we know. And if that was, the sign isn't even the conception. The sign is in verse 15, 16, the maturity of the child. Just so, what I always say to you, listen up, my dear brothers and sisters. When someone approaches you and wants you to leave the God of Israel using your scripture, the Holy Scriptures, the Jewish Scriptures, don't worry. It's all right. Hashem is, when you're telling the truth, you don't have to worry. In life, right? If you're going through customs and you show your passport, you don't got to worry because you really, you think you could produce the driver's license. Liars got to be really smart. All you have to do is look at the context. The answer is there. It's there for you. Just look at the context. It'll always provide an answer for you. Hashem will not abandon you. Okay? Thank you for your question.
All right. Very good. All right. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
This is Mani from Atlanta.
Welcome back.
How are you?
Doing great, thank you. What's the question?
Just before my question, I just wanted to like follow up with one of the callers who asked about like why missionaries don't go after Muslims. But I feel like I've been in the U.S. for about 9 years now, and my I guess experience has been exact opposite. It's been one missionary after the other, trying to use tactics. Actually, the most I guess glaring one was the Chrislam, where they say you can remain culturally Muslims, and they try to use the Quran to teach how you can still believe Jesus died for your sins, etc., etc. You can pray, you can fast, you can do all those things, but just believe in your heart that He's the Word, He's the same as God, and He died for our sins. So,
my dear cousin, I just got to tell you this before you go on. You can actually, at my Moody Bible Institute, there are graduate degrees in indigenous missions, not just in Moody. Many of them, they teach you how to convert people in their own culture. This is not like, this has been refined. There are textbooks on this. So yeah, of course. I mean, you have to understand, from the outside, people may not be familiar with the Muslim world if they're not part of the Muslim world. Muslims are their faith is completely under attack if they are living in the West. If a Muslim doesn't want their faith attacked, all you do is move to Saudi Arabia and get rid of the internet, and you'll be fine. But outside of that, you're living in, maybe in the Gulf states, it might be, it's a crime and stuff. But they don't realize that actually Muslims are under constant attack, whether it's in Europe or the United States. Their faith is under attack in many, many ways. But thank you. So go ahead. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about, the prophets before, for example, Moses, Abraham, and Noah. In the Jewish tradition, did they, for example, we believe that they had scriptures as well. So is that similar to, what the Jewish faith would believe? And if so, then where are they, and what was their language? If you want to just comment on that.
Really good question. Thank you. Really, really good question. Really good question. Thank you.
Very good. Go ahead and hang up now. You can tune in for your answer, okay? Thank you. How about it?
Okay, that's a really good question. Thank you. Okay. So let me just, for many listeners to the show might not understand the breadth of your question. So just a little bit about Islamic teachings. That is that Noah was a great prophet. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all these were prophets, but they are to Muslims as well. But in Islam, there are certain prophets that are completely unique, that are of course called a prophet, Nabi or Navi. It's the same word in Arabic and Hebrew, but there's a word that conveys that they are of a higher order, and that's a Rasul. And there were a number of people who that. Moses, Olav Shalom, was a Rasul in Islam, which means he had a Sharia. Sharia means, as with Abraham, Sharia means that which is straight, but it means he conveyed a message, a unique message, and a written message that was conveyed to the generation. And Muslims generally view that Sharia of, let's say, of Abraham to have been lost. Okay? That means they don't have it anymore. That means... So let me be very clear. So for us, the only written that has survived is the words of Abraham as recorded in the Torah. That does not preclude the possibility that Abraham wrote something very sacred down and given to someone who was a contemporary. Abraham of blessed memory lived about 4,000 years ago. But that's not germane to us, and that's not part of the message found in the Torah. That means Noah could have written something to his generation. Noah lived even earlier. Noah lived roughly 400 years before Abraham, a little bit more than that. So Noah certainly could have written something down, but it's not in Tanakh. Only what's recorded in Tanakh is Nitnu Ladoros, is relevant for future generations. So whatever Abraham wrote and preached, same thing goes for Noah, is recorded in the Torah that we would study. Jewish people are not looking to find a writing of Abraham that's not in the Torah. We would love to find that. Make no mistake about that. We would love to get our hands on anything Abraham wrote during his extraordinary life, of course. But we don't think about a higher level of Navi that has a canonical text that's outside of Tanakh. We're not thinking that way, and there's nothing in the orbit of Judaism that conveys that. It doesn't preclude that. It's just we're not thinking about that. Everything that is valuable that Abraham conveyed in his life is recorded in the Torah and in the oral Torah, and that's what we have. Again, it's not to preclude that Abraham would have written something down, and if we found it would be inconceivable. No, let me change that. It would be amazing to find that. It's not inconceivable because we actually do have, it's not like text, like the kind of stuff that could have just possibly survived 4,000 years would generally be something chiseled into stone or clay. Something organic like parchment and certainly papyrus would never last unless it was in the most extraordinary circumstances. I mean, or it could have been chiseled on silver. We have excerpts from the Torah that date back to the First Temple period, much older than Dead Sea Scrolls. So just a little thing about vellum and other and papyrus. That stuff won't last. Vellum would last a very, 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 very long time under the right conditions. The Dead Sea provides those conditions. So I'm going beyond the scope of your question. The answer is that what we study, what we crave, what we think about is everything that is transmitted to us by the prophets of blessed memory in the written and in the oral transmission, not another book that did not survive. There's no one even thinking about that, and the Torah is guiding us in that direction. So it's like a longer answer, I think, what you're looking for. Thank you for your question.
All right. Still got time for another one, Rabbi?
Sure.
Okay. Caller, you're live on air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Yes, my name is Keita, and I'm calling from Illinois.
Welcome, Keita.
My question is let me just ask it.
Okay.
So, definitively, the question is, can a man have more than one firstborn child? The reason why I'm asking it is because in Exodus 13:1, it says the first issue of every womb among the children of Israel. So with Jacob having the 4 women who gave him children, if you define the firstborn by the womb and not the male, would that mean that he would have 4 firstborn sons?
The answer is yes.
Did that make sense?
Yes. So the answer is, biblically speaking, there is so thank you for your question.
Yeah, Keita, go ahead and hang up now. You can
Thank
tune in for
you.
the rest, okay? Thank you. Great question, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, Rabbi.
Yes. So the answer is that the sanctification of a firstborn child would go according to the mother. And although today Jews do not practice polygamy, but the prohibition against polygamy is roughly 1,000 years old. And it's actually not that rough. It goes back to the year 1000. Although I don't think it was widely practiced for thousands of years. I mean, it was, but not widely. Why? Beyond the scope. But yeah, the answer would be yes. So thank you for that question. Let's go ahead.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Well, I'm going to welcome this one here. 1 second. Well, where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hello, Rabbi Singer and William. Yes, I have a question that came to my mind in response to when I was listening to not this past Sunday, Mother's Day, but the Sunday before that. And I wanted to call in to ask. So in a recent answer, Rabbi Singer, you mentioned that when Mashiach comes, that there's going to be 2 segments of society, 2/3 of a non-Jewish humanity, enemies of God, who will go to war and be cut off completely. and a third part of non-Jews who will be saved. So it kind of got me to wondering, and it makes me wonder and think if it could be those that have not found the truth of Judaism, like those of us who are finding it, that might view the true Mashiach when he comes as what they would believe to be the Antichrist, and would make up that two-thirds group that would be the enemies of God going to war with Mashiach. So can you help me understand this? Because I'm trying to reconcile that idea that their two-thirds would go to war as enemies of God with the idea that when the Mashiach comes, everyone is supposed to know the truth and everyone's supposed to recognize that he is the true Mashiach. Otherwise, if they don't, he isn't the real deal. So how do these two things become reconciled? Thank you very much. I appreciate all you do, and I appreciate your answer.
Awesome. Okay, go ahead and hang up now. You continue for your answer. Rabbi, take it away.
Yeah, that's like one of those really, 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 really great questions. Thank you for your question. So the question goes to Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8 and 9. Those are the last two passages of that chapter. And I probably should unpack that for those who are viewing the show right now. So Zechariah is, the whole end of the book of Zechariah is messianic. All this is. And Zechariah is, the book of Zechariah, is one of those books that tells a lot about the end-time war, which is the precursor to the coming of the Messiah. And you should be able to hear in those words the answer to one of your questions. In that, we have Milchemes Gog uMagog. As it turns out, the war of Gog uMagog, as it turns out, that phrase is not used in Tanakh. And you're going, what? Well, it isn't. Well, something like it appears in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38, right at the get-go. But so we have very famously in the end chapters of Zechariah, written at the beginning of the Second Temple period, so he's a very late prophet, we have chapters about what will happen immediately prior to the coming of the Messiah that will trigger the Messianic age, but they are prior to the Messiah coming. And we have a lot of that. We have a lot of that in Ezekiel 38 and 39 in particular. We have a lot of that. So to answer your question, Zechariah chapter 13 is about, I want to change that. The end of Zechariah is also a lot about non-Jews. A lot. It really is, can be said that like the Jews are almost ancillary in that, generally speaking, the end of Zechariah is about the Gentiles going, I got it. And 10 of them grabbing the shirt of a Jew and say, take us with you. Now we know God is with you. In fact, what Zechariah is there to convey is how important those who are not from the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how so many of them will repent and come to know about the God of Israel and the fact that God will be king over the whole world, and his name will be, he will be one, his name will be one. That's like, wow, Zechariah 14. Everyone should know those passages. Now, as a precursor to the coming of Mashiach, there's a war, meaning nations will come against Jerusalem and they will seek to destroy it. That's going to be a really bad idea. See the beginning of Zechariah 8 and see the beginning of Zechariah 12. I'm going to talk about 12 more because 12 is right before the passage you asked about. So the nations will come up against Jerusalem. This is the event that will occur right before the coming of Mashiach, which means that the event of the whole world knowing the truth and the knowledge of God covering the world as the water covers the sea, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9, will not yet have happened. So nations will come against Yerushalayim. They'll be utterly destroyed. Yerushalayim will be a heavy, burdensome stone to all the nations that will come against it. God will strengthen even the weakest of the Jewish people. They will be like David, like the angels of the Lord of hosts. That means miraculously strong to destroy the enemy. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 8 and 9. Now, what Zechariah 13 does is it breaks it down. The text doesn't really say 2/3 and 1/3, although crazy, most translations do that. They represent that there'll be 2/3 who will be cut off, like that. So they go, all right, that must mean 2/3 of the world, 66.666% of the world will be cut off, and a third, 33%, will be saved. So that's completely not correct, and almost all the translations say that. The text says, "V'hoyu b'chol ha'aretz noma Hashem pishnayim bo yikaresu yigvo," which means that in all the world, all the land, declares the Lord. This is great. Now listen. Pishnayim bo. You know what that means? So if you really know your Torah, you're really going to go wild on this one. The mouth of two will come forward. These are, now, if you are familiar with the delicious language of the Torah, then you know the term Pishnayim, because that's the language of witnesses, of those who bear testimony. In this case, it's false testimony. See Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 6. Pishnayim Edim, according to the voice of two witnesses. So this is a throwback to many verses. So you're going, well, Rabbi, help me out here. I'm confused. So there's going to be two voices, two forces in the world that claim, well, they know the truth, and they're completely wrong. They're going to be the nations of the world who are going to say, before Mashiach comes, we have the truth, not you. And they're going to come against Yerushalayim, two powerful forces that'll be our enemies. And they're going to claim that they bear witness to the truth. Isaiah, for example, taunts them. If you go to the famous Isaiah 43, it's famous because of so many reasons, but, my witnesses, declares the Lord, servant to my... Well, where did witnesses come up in there? Like, when did that... So it actually came up earlier. If you dial back Isaiah 43, but don't start at 10, because those verses are so iconic that people don't dial it back. And if you want to drink and just not feel thirsty again, read the whole chapter. Don't you want to feel satiated? Read the whole chapter. So earlier, just go back to Isaiah 43, but instead go from the beginning, and I'm going to just roll forward a little to get to where we're going to, that in the chapters, the passages immediately before Isaiah 43, verse 10, meaning in 43, verse 7, but 8 and 9, Isaiah of blessed memory, the great prophet, taunts the nations of the world. And he says, come forth, please, bring us your testimony. Tell us about the former things. This is like, it's like laden in sarcasm. And this is, Yeshaya was, in terms of the way he wrote. He says, please tell us about the former things. Tell us how we got here, please. And he taunts the nation. This is where Isaiah 43:10 comes from. Come on, guys, don't you want to fall in love? Don't you want to just kiss Hashem? Kiss me with the kisses of thy lips. Thy love is better than wine. Shir Hashim, the opening passage of the Song of Songs. I mean, guys, if you really want to stop kissing God through a towel and just feel it, read the chapter. If you read in Hebrew, you'll lose your mind. So that's where this is coming from. The nations of the world in the prophetic text are not standing around just going, smoking a cigarette while the Jewish people are engaging in their faith. The nations of the world, we're told that although they're aware of Torah, see Deuteronomy chapter 4, they come up against the Jewish people and have a different message, and they have a different witness to the world, and we want to be a witness to the world. And exactly, that's the language of Christianity. We want to bear witness. Would you witness to me? Would you witness to him? Did you witness yet? Have you? I witnessed to her. I witnessed to... I'm not kidding. Isaiah taunts this. Now, prophets had a way of teaching Jewish history. That's right. They told about history that hadn't yet occurred. So Isaiah is telling us that in an event right before the Messianic age, there will be two major forces of thinking about how this all goes that is completely wrong. And they are the enemies of Eretz Yisrael. And they're going to claim that they are the proper witnesses to the truth. Got it? And they're false witnesses. And Isaiah, I'm giving you an example, Isaiah 43, but instead of starting at verse 10, where a lot of people do, because it's a great verse. And it's a great verse that there's only one God and no other, for sure. But where Atem Edai, you are my witnesses, comes from, like, where does Edai, like, where does that come from? It didn't start there. Go back. It's a playoff of what was immediately earlier. Isaiah 43, verse 8 and 9. Please, come, all the nations. Please tell us your testimony of the former things. It's, of course, completely sarcastic. It's there to mock the false teachings of the world. And that is, it's not unique to Isaiah, but Isaiah does it as no one else does. He's mocking false teaching. So, therefore, now with Yeshayahu, which means we have nutrients in us, we have vitamins in us, we know how to eat, breathe Tanakh. We can now look at this, that in the whole world there'll be these two witnesses, meaning two testimonies. That's what it means. Pishnayim. It doesn't say 2/3. And what are they going to do? Well, they're going to be the witnesses against TORAH, against Klal Yisrael, against the Jewish faith. Yikaresu, they will be destroyed, and they will be cut off, and they will be destroyed. Now, a vahashlishis, and doesn't mean a third, it means a third part. That's how it should be translation. A third part of the nations of the world, they're going to repent, and therefore yivaser bo, and they will remain, or they will survive, or it doesn't really say they will be saved, but that's what's being conveyed there. And then it says what's going to happen with that third. That third is going to be refined like gold is in fire. I mean, they're going to be separated from everything else. So this is the precursor to the coming of the Mashiach. And now to finally bring this into a full circle, I believe that in fact that one of those witnesses that are false witnesses is the church. I know this is the church. This is Edom. But it is specifically Christians who can get it. Christians who can repent, because they know that when they discover Jesus is not the Messiah and he's not the second person of triune Godhead, and all of that is blasphemy, they're the ones who can embrace Judaism so easily. Today, who is in conversion programs around the world, seeking conversion, waiting years for a conversion? There are some people who were formerly Hindus and Buddhists. There are some, but they're predominantly Christians around the world. Why? Because for them, the moment they apprehend that the core tenets of Christianity are opposed by the Jewish scriptures, they then go to the default, which is Judaism, and embrace the Jewish faith. And there are thousands of them around the world who are waiting to embrace the God of Israel as a Jew, and they have already embraced the God of Israel as a Ben Noach. So that's happening. So, and please God, we should see this redemption quickly in our time, that they will come to embrace the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they will touch nothing unclean. They will wash their hands of this. And then we will see the prophecies of the great men of Israel, like Zephaniah, like Zephaniah, chapter 3, verse 9, and all the nations will speak in a pure speech. Shalom, and thank you so much for joining me.
Awesome, Rabbi. It was a great show today.
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we will see you same time, same place next week, Hashem willing. And for all those for those of you who don't have the books yet or the audio files, you feel free to go to outreachjudaism.org, and you will find links to the books. But the audio files, they're actually files now. They're not, the CDs aren't out anymore. They're out of print. So just click on the free audio tab at the top of the website, and you can get all of the complimentary audio files that go with the chapters in the books. It's extra information. It's not the same. So it's not the book on audio. It's completely additional information is the best way to say it. And also on the screen, there's a few more counter-missionary resources there for you. We've got Judaism and Christianity: A Contrast by Rabbi Stuart Federow, Revealing Matthew's Secrets by Jason LaCrosse, and Leaving Jesus by James Wood Jr., all of which are available at Amazon.com. Thank you guys for tuning in. And Rabbi, once again, I appreciate your time and really looking forward to next week. Shalom, everybody.
אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד חשוב מכל חשוב